The European Union stole $300 billion worth of our assets, and now they want us to return Romania's gold. This statement was made a few days ago by former Russian president and current deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, in response to the European Parliament voting in favor of a resolution calling on Russia to return Romania's gold that was stored in the Kremlin. The Russians refused to return it despite Romania's persistent demands. Medvedev not only mocked the European Parliament's decision but also insulted the EU and the Romanians, using vulgar language which can be seen as an indirect response to the European Parliament and Romania. In essence, Russia will not return anything to Romania, and the gold belonging to the Romanian central bank will likely not be returned to Romania, especially amid the current tensions between the two countries. Following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which shares a border with Romania, an EU and NATO member state. But here, a question arises. What brought the Romanian central bank's gold to Russia? How did Romania place its national treasure at the mercy of the Russians, whose historical relationship with the Romanians can be described as, at best, volatile and unstable? With the outbreak of World War I in the summer of 1914, most European countries joined the war, quickly forming two sides: Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, who together were known as the Allies or the Triple Entente, and on the other side were Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, known as the Central Powers. The involvement of all these parties in the war caused the continent of Europe to ignite, leading some countries that were not original parties to the war to align with one of the two alliances to protect themselves. In the midst of this turmoil, there was a country in southeastern Europe that was confused and did not know what to do because its bad luck placed it literally in the middle between the two sides of the war. I am talking about Romania, which was literally between a rock and a hard place. The Soviet Union bordered Romania to the east, and to the west were the Soviet Union's adversaries, Serbia and Hungary. In this complex situation, Romania remained neutral until 1916. In August 1916, after 2 years of hesitation, Romania entered the war on the side of the Allies. On August 27, Romania declared war on the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the conflict began with the Battle of Transylvania, where the Romanian army tried to take control of the Transylvania region. Initially, the Romanians achieved significant successes in the battle, but quickly retreated and fled as the Central Powers armies, led by Germany, launched a counterattack in September of the same year. The Germans continued to press the Romanians and advanced toward the Romanian capital, Bucharest. In anticipation of the capital's fall and occupation by the Germans, Romanian officials began fleeing the capital toward the Soviet border. The government, the royal family, the parliament, and other central state institutions left Bucharest and went to the city of Iași, located only 10 miles from the Soviet border. It was the same city where the Romanians decided to move their national treasures to prevent them from falling into German hands if Bucharest was occupied. In September 1916, as the battles with the Germans intensified, the National Bank of Romania, the country's central bank, began preparing to move its treasure to a safe place far from Bucharest. Within 1 week, the legal reserves of gold and other assets were transported to the city of Iași. The bank sent the reserves there not only to protect them from potential theft by the Germans, but also because these reserves were the foundation on which Romania's monetary system was built. The Romanian currency, the lei, was partially backed by gold. At that time, the central bank's regulations required the bank to maintain a gold reserve equal to at least 40% of the value of the banknotes issued. This made the Romanian gold reserves doubly important, not only as a national treasure, but also as the backbone of the monetary system that ensured the convertibility of the local currency, which would be worthless without it. The central bank's reserves and other Romanian treasures arrived in Lassi, and the central bank's headquarters was relocated to the city on November 14, 1916. However, Romania's treasure did not stay there for long. In early December, the Germans managed to occupy most of Romanian territory, including the capital, Bucharest, for the second time. For the same reason, fear of the Germans, the Romanian government and the central bank decided to move Romania's treasures to a safer location than Lassi, which was vulnerable to German invasion at any moment. The Romanians considered several allied countries to which they could move their treasure, such as Sweden, the United States, and Britain. However, transporting the treasure to any of these countries was very difficult and fraught with risks, because Germany or its allies could easily intercept and seize the shipment. Given these circumstances, the Romanians decided to move the treasure to the only allied country with which they shared a border, the Soviet Union. The Soviets and Romanians were on the same side in World War I, the Allies, which made the Soviets a trusted option for the Romanians. In reality, the Romanians did not fully trust the Soviets, but they had no other options. By December 1916, the Germans had occupied most of southern Romania. The Soviets promised the Romanians that their belongings would remain safe and could be retrieved whenever they wanted. Based on this promise, Romania began sending its treasures to Moscow between December 12 and 14, 1916. The Romanian Central Bank loaded 1,738 boxes onto 17 rail cars, 1,735 of which were filled with coins and 3 with gold bars. In the same shipment, the royal family sent 2 boxes containing the jewelry of Queen Marie of Romania. The central bank's boxes were valued at 314.5 million lei, and Queen Marie's jewelry was worth 7 million lei. The train left the railway station in Lassi and arrived in Moscow on December 20. The Romanian shipment was then transported to the Kremlin and stored in a secure warehouse there. A few weeks later, in January 1917, a joint inventory of the box's contents began. This inventory involved 3 representatives from the Russian Ministry of Finance, a delegation from the Romanian Central Bank, and the Romanian consul in Moscow, Pierre Kern. After completing the inventory on February 4, both parties agreed that all the valuable items verified, inventoried, or weighed matched the Romanian National Bank's records in terms of quantity and value. This was the first shipment. In the summer of 1917, Romanian authorities anticipated a large-scale attack by the Central Powers led by Germany. In this context, Romania decided to send a second shipment to Russia, transporting the remaining national treasures still in their possession. This shipment was larger and more important than the first, as it included valuable items from various entities other than the central bank, such as banks, the Romanian Academy, the National Museum of Antiquities, the State Art Gallery, ministries, and monasteries. Almost everything valuable Romania owned was part of this shipment: gold, artifacts, books, archives, documents, and artworks. In July 1917, representatives of the Romanian Central Bank signed a protocol with representatives of the Russian Ministry of Finance, regulating the process of transferring Romania's treasures to Moscow. In the same month, the Romanians shipped items worth 7.5 billion lei to Moscow, and the Russians received these items, some of which were priceless, with a promise to return them to the Romanians as soon as they requested. This included 91.5 tons of pure gold that the Romanian Central Bank had deposited with them. In early August, after everything had arrived in Moscow, the Soviets and Romanians signed a protocol aimed at establishing a special depot for Romania in the Kremlin. This protocol stipulated that the Russian government guaranteed the full return of the treasure to Romania. This was the agreement between the two parties, but in reality, this was the last time the Romanians saw their gold. Their gold and most of the treasures they had deposited with the Russians were lost. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power in Russia. In January 1918, the Council of People's Commissars of the Russian Soviet Republic severed relations with Romania and decided to arrest the Romanian ambassador in Petrograd, now St. Petersburg. The major blow came when they seized Romania's treasures stored in the Kremlin. Lenin decided that his government would keep these treasures and not hand them over to the Romanian oligarchy. He promised that he would later return them to the Romanian people, but this never happened. For more than 100 years, Romania has been chasing the Russians, trying to convince them to return their treasures, but to no avail. One government after another has demanded this from the Russians, but to no avail. The initial attempt was at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, where Romania pressed hard to reclaim its treasures from the Russians, but the Soviets refused to comply. The Romanians repeatedly tried again at various international conferences. Things began to shift slightly after diplomatic relations between Romania and the Soviet Union were restored in 1934. The following year, the Russians sent Romania 1,436 boxes containing documents. When the boxes arrived in Romania, the Romanians discovered that they had been opened, tampered with, and some contents had been stolen, even though the agreement between the two parties stipulated that these boxes should not be opened and should be returned as they were. The Russians only returned some documents to Romania, nothing more. Years passed and the situation changed. World War II started in the late 1930s, and this time Romania decided to fight alongside Germany against the Soviet Union. Romania joined the losing side, and it paid the price when the Soviet Union occupied its territories, with Soviet forces remaining there until 1958. 2 years before the Soviets left Romania in 1956, the Soviets decided to return part of the treasures they had stored in the Kremlin to Romania. This included about 39,000 pieces of archaeological art, which were returned to the National Museum of History in Romania, the Institute of Archaeology, and the National Research Office. This was the last thing the Romanians saw of their treasures. They neither saw the gold nor the rest of the items the Russians decided to keep. In 1965, Romania again requested the return of its treasures from the Soviets, but this time the Soviets shocked them by saying that Romania's debts to the Soviet Union exceeded the value of the Romanian gold, and therefore they received nothing in return. However, the Romanians never lost hope, as expressed clearly by Măgur Isarescu, the governor of the Romanian Central Bank, who stated that neither the Romanian Central Bank nor the Romanian government, regardless of their ideological leanings, had given up on attempts to recover the treasure of the National Bank of Romania. However, hope was renewed for the Romanians after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s. After this collapse, the Russian Federation emerged in its current form. On July 4, 2003, Russia and Romania signed a joint treaty called the Treaty of Cooperation and Friendly Relations between Romania and the Russian Federation. During the treaty negotiations, both parties agreed to form a joint committee to address outstanding issues between the two countries, including the matter of the Romanian treasure. This committee was formed in 2004 and has met 5 times since, the last meeting being in 2019. During the meetings, the Russian side acknowledged the validity of the documents provided by the Romanian side as proof of Romania's deposits of its treasures in the Kremlin during World War I, and confirmed that these documents had the status of an international treaty and proved that the Romanians handed over their treasures to the Soviets, including the gold of the Romanian Central Bank. However, this acknowledgement had no real effect on the ground. The Russians are still completely rejecting the idea of returning the gold to Romania, and this idea is no longer up for discussion. In essence, the Russians are telling the Romanians that they have nothing to claim from them. The Russian stance has even become more rigid given the current developments in the Russian-Ukrainian war. Romania not only opposes Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but is also preparing for the possibility of entering a war with Russia at any moment. The relations between the two countries are currently extremely tense, making it impossible for Russia to change its position regarding the gold issue. However, the Romanians do not give up or surrender. Romanian MP in the European Parliament, Eugen Tomek, submitted a resolution to the European Parliament calling on Russia to return the Romanian treasures, including 91.5 tons of gold, to Romania. The European Parliament approved the resolution on March 14, 2024. The resolution passed by the European Parliament is non-binding, but it clearly provoked the Russians so much that former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev attacked it strongly in a speech filled with vulgar language. Medvedev described Romania as not being a country and insulted European leaders, calling the European Parliament's decision audacious. The reason for Medvedev's extreme anger at the decision is that it was issued at the same time that the European Union has frozen hundreds of billions of Russian central bank assets as part of the sanctions imposed on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. However, beyond Medvedev's unrestrained remarks, the current stance on Romania's gold demands was clearly expressed by Mikhail Shvidkoy, President Vladimir Putin's special envoy for international cultural cooperation. In his comment on the European Parliament's decision, Shvidkoy described Romania's demand for gold as illegitimate and said that the resolution, in his opinion, is merely a meaningless provocation. He then bluntly stated that mutual settlements with Romania have become a thing of the past, which is a polite way for the Russians to tell the Romanians that they have nothing to claim from them. Can Putin change his position at any moment? Can the European Union force Russia to return the gold to Romania?